on Saturday hit the town on Katesh North. This even as the president of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu, has sent her condolences and said she had ordered for redeployment of more government efforts to rescue people.
Elsewhere, President William Ruto is set to embark on a significant two-day visit to India commencing today in response to an invitation extended by India's President Momo. This visit marks President Ruto's maiden trip to India since assuming office as Kenya's fifth head of state in September 2022.
The East African Community EAC Regional Office began its withdrawal from the Republic of Congo on Sunday after Kinshasa deemed it ineffective and refused to renew its mandate. Well, a very good morning to you. It is the 4th day of December 2023. Wake up and prepare yourself for a whole packed show this particular Monday, because we're starting the whole Monday in a very fresh kind of mood. Fred is not here with us to tell you the countdown, but
21 days.
We shall do that. 21 days. Wow. So I think it's good to continue saying Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yes.
Oh yes.
Yes, you are.
I'm used to Stanley Yarungita. And this particular morning, we'll be discussing matters, the whole floods, taking a look at the death toll, taking a look at the government's move, the whole mitigating kind of measures that have been made. So for you, definitely don't want to miss that conversation.
Great. And yes, it's 21 days to Christmas officially. Definitely looking forward to Christmas. I don't know if you are. My name is Flora Lemuki and welcome to this edition of Morning Cafe. This 4th day of December 2023. Of course, you can be part of this conversation at TV47 News on X, TV47 Kenya on Facebook. The hashtag is Morning Cafe.
Right.
We hop straight to the dailies.
Oh, yes. And even as speak about, before even getting into the dailies, I'm pretty sure you had mentioned the diary, just alluding to it earlier, the president's schedule today.
We'll be in India today. Yeah.
We'll also be updating you this particular diary as we move forward. But let's hop into the dailies this morning. The Standard, the front page of it, experts, Kibaki will be shocked at Rutonomics. They call it a hard reality. Economists say President Ruto claims of copying former President Mwai Kibaki's economic playbook seem not to be working, as his policies and interventions point in the opposite direction, leaving Kenyans desperate and hurting. It's interesting, Lemuki, the front page of the Standard seemingly mirrors what is on the front page of the Daily Nation, taking a look at the balance between how the president is playing his economics versus how former presidents have been doing it. And the Standard puts up that particular number there, 10.5%. That is an interest. The central bank rate is at 10.5%, up from 7.2% in July 2022. Since then, it has been on a steady climb. Other stories making it to the Standard, the bottom strip. Kenya's grain lifeline port, most protected out of Ukraine's port city of Odessa, and packs the vagaries of war and fragility of food exportation during wartime, on pages 8 and 9. And again, interestingly, that they have that on the national pages. Some international news on pages 6 and 7. It's a special report. Fierce gang leaders sent to welcome Kenya police in 200-year-old Haiti mess. Haiti's decades of gang violence has been well documented due to its long history of bloody coups and political instability. And it all started with the slaves revolting against their French masters in 1804. Let's cross over to the top strip of the Standard. Matters politics on page 2. Stop undermining governors, Raila tells president. And just beside that, Kissinger's chaos legacy in Cambodia, the world, page 22. Insight on the Health and Science magazine. Did I get infected with HIV from a human bite? And I have that for you. Matters Sports on page 30. Big Boys Winners Kenya Cup gets underway. Let's flip on the back page of the Standard. Ladies and gentlemen, it's action time. They have a photo of a young lady there, seemingly smiling. And she's an Italian fan before match during the Euro 2020 tournament. So it's the whole Euro 2024. And they have the venues for that particular game and how it will be played. And that's the Standard this morning. I'm glad, Fred is not here to hamper more pressure that
Remind you that Sisi Kama Arsenal, we did that thing again. It's very lonely at the top.
I think at this point, other EPL teams have just said, you know what? The Inya kulipisha kisasi here last time. So you guys just take it.
Well, let's have a look at the Daily Nation this morning. Not an interesting headline, really. Kenya's debt hole and just money going into debt service on verge of surpassing government and county spending. And just in numbers there, at the time when former President Mwai Kibaki left, we were at 1.79 trillion shillings. And they found, yes, 182%. And at the time former President Uhuru Kenyatta was leaving, we were at 8.7 trillion shillings, an increase of more than 7 trillion shillings within a span of 10 years. And 1 year later, after President William Ruto was inaugurated as the 5th president of Kenya, the debt is at 10.58 trillion shillings as of September 2023. Yes, and in 12 months, there has been an increase of 21% already. Just raises so much questions on how that will be looking like in the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. And whereas new 2 trillion shillings loans from the IMF and the World Bank have eased fears of the country defaulting on Eurobond, they are plunging the country deeper into debt, besides being saddled with tough conditions such as punitive tax measures and removal of subsidies that have only made life harder for many Kenyans. And that is the story on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Another big story there, higher fuel prices on the cards as Ruto pushes for new carbon tax, and the cost of fossil fuel and travel could rise should an ambitious new carbon tax proposal fronted by President William Ruto at the COP28 summit in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, sails through, and the proposal seeks to compel fossil fuel companies and industries that emit greenhouse gases to pay for the damage that operations cause on the planet. And that is the story on page 6 and 7 of the Daily Nation. And of course, COP28 continues all the way to the 12th of December. And pictured there is a president with President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan of the United Arab Emirates and the ruler of Abu Dhabi at Expo City, Dubai, yesterday. Other stories on the right strip of the Daily Nation. Increase free school cash for each learner, NAT demands. And the Kenya Union of Teachers wants a significant increase in funds that the government allocates for each learner in primary and junior and senior secondary, saying the current allocations are too low for schools to meet their programs. And not SECGEN Collins or you, they are contended the current allocations are causing school heads financial distress. Another story there, River Nzui crossing still incomplete years after tragedy claimed 32 lives. And long before the raging waters of River Enzio claimed the lives of 32 people, heading to a wedding party in December 2021 in Kitui, danger always lurked. Residents had always feared for the worst, but again, they had hoped that a proper bridge would be constructed, which has not happened to date. That is the story on page 10 of the Daily Nation. On the higher education pullout this morning, the cry of primary school PhD holders. And yes, let's have a look at what we have on the back page of the Daily Nation. Mutiso winds up a second as Ethiopia's Lema lowers Valencia Marathon mark. And yes, those are some of the results of that marathon that was held in, yes, that's that. Away from that, 2024 Women AFCON qualifiers, starlets face tough task against Botswana. And another story there, Kenyan girls face a defining moment in CAP qualifiers. And yes, that is what we have on the Daily Nation this morning.
Ongeze gazeti la Taifa Leo asubuhi hii, UDA kuwapebu wabunge wa kaidi. Chama chasema hakitavumilia tena tabia ya wabunge wake kupinga sera za serikali katika majukwaa hadharani. Masuala ya utofauti haya. Katibu mkuu wa chama asema yapo majukwaa ya ndani kwa ndani ambapo viongozi husika wanafaa kueleza kutoridhishwa kwa wala si kuipinga serikali waziwazi. Chapisha pale picha ya katibu mkuu huyo Cleophas Malala akinabana na Japheth Nyakundi mwekazi na upande wa kulia pamoja na Charles Matoke mkurugenzi wa masuala ya diaspora pale jana au mwezi wa Oktoba pale kitambo. Vidokezo vingine katika gazeti hili hapo chini, Raila msiingize siasa Mumias. Kiongozi huyo upinzani eleza imani mwelekezaji au mwekezaji atafufua kiwanda hicho. Kwingineko madaktari watishia kugoma. Kaunti za Kajiado, Busia, Kilifi na Embu tayari zimetoa notisi zao kuhusu mgomo huo. Katika ukurasa wa 5 pale juu, vidokezo vingine katika gazeti la Taifa Leo, wabunge wawili waponea kusombwa na mafuriko. Viongozi hao walikuwa katika harakati za kuokoa wanavijiji. Masuala ya michezo, Chelsea na Liverpool zafanya kweli. EPL, timu hizi za nyuka wapinzani licha ya kubanwa kutoka ukurasa wa 20. Na ndio kwa sababu mwelekezi wetu leo Nick na furaha riboribo kama mwana Chelsea. Ndio gazeti la Taifa Leo. Shilingi 500 pale Tanzania.
Okay, let's have a look at the People Daily this morning. Top headline there, public servants on the edge of a new health cover, and state officials in panic following radical proposals that could deny them enhanced comprehensive insurance. And that is the story on page 4 of the People Daily this morning. On the top strip, why EAC withdrew troops from Congo and countries ask their soldiers to return home after host president accuses them of being cozy with rebels fighting his administration. That is the story on page 2 of the People Daily this morning. Other stories there, pain as cost of groceries hit at the roof, and agency report reveals that Kenyans face tough festive season due to high food prices. Yes, other story there, anger after coast mother draws baby in the ocean. And that's the People Daily.
Right, let's take a look at the Star this morning. The big story is Karua walkout looms as Raila team divided, and they say all is well. Raila Kalunzo have endorsed report and dismissed division talks. So dissatisfied, NAK Kenya party chief to make major announcement this week on pages 4 and 5. Just below that, some pictorials of the troops at the ESCRF headquarters, that is in Goma, DRC. And the right, Kenyan soldiers at Goma airport on their way home. And the Star says time to go. KDF begins withdrawal from DRC as Army Chief Ogola visits troops. On the bottom scroll of the Star, matters new council, race for top law society of Kenya jobs WhatsApp as polls date set for February 22nd. And still on the bottom scroll, Mudavadi leads a 3-day fact-finding mission to violence ravaged Haiti. On page 2, Matters Voices, Energy Tourism will spark growth. And finally, the very top scroll of the Star, an initiation ordeal. Teenager tortured for 3 days, forced to eat his vomit after cut. Wow, that is on page 3. Quite sad news there on the Star.
Let's cross over to Business Daily. And the top headline there, bank dollar holding rise to record 966.4 billion shillings. And dollar stockpiles swells 78% in September, and the shilling free fall blamed on shortage of fears. Other stories there on matters fintech. MPs launch law changes for cryptocurrencies taxation. And a parliamentary committee has backed a bill that will allow the taxation of more than 4 million Kenyans estimated to be trading in cryptocurrencies, as MPs accused the Central Bank of Kenya of dragging its feet on regulating that industry. Away from that, on the right strip of the Business Daily, Kenya Power blames fake forex rate of a 23 billion shillings loss. Other stories, the infrastructure bonds shine in secondary market. And on the top strip, an opinion piece. If ever there was a defining period of a collective entrepreneurial madness, it was the 2014 quail farming pandemic. That is a story by Carol Musioka on page 9 of the Business Daily. And an interesting piece from the Life Pullout, Signs Your Maturing Son is suffering from depression. Yes, and that is the Business Daily this morning. Time now to cross borders.
Yes, and we just start with the East African, just to paint a picture of what is happening in the East African borders. And the big story is Kir's full plate at home, EAC, with a general election, conflict and struggling economy. Will the Juba leader have time to deal with regional security and trade disputes? More is on page 4. And just below that, they have a photo of President William Ruto, who was speaking at the high-level segment for heads of state and government during the COP28 on the first day of December. And they call it a critical moment for climate action. And just beside it on the right scroll, while Ruto's cheap houses plan ran into headwinds. So developers say the high interest rate regime makes it difficult to raise capital as government continues to tax workers. And below it, IGAD called summit on Sudan peace. The bloc has organized a meeting of heads of state in Djibouti on December 9th to help combatants return to mediation table on pages 8 to 9. At the very top scroll, real quick, other highlights on this paper. Matters money, manufacturing to the rescue. Matters markets inside equities M&A plan in East Africa. And an outlook, EACOP wars to pile up in Uganda. They ask, was the Kampala regulator soft on the developers? And an opinion, 75% of East Africans born of war pain. There's an opinion by Onyango Obo. And finally, the Pullout magazine, Good You Bad You, how the West views the wars in Gaza and Ukraine. That is the front page of the East African.
Namna tuangazie gazeti la Wananchi kule Tanzania. Taarifa kuu pale, maporomoko ya matope yaua watu 47 na ni kutoka Mlima Hanang, 10 wajeruhiwa, wengine hawajulikani walipo, barabara za fungwa. Samia atoa maagizo mawaziri, vikosi vya uokoaji, IGP Wambua wasili. Na watu 85 ni idadi ya watu waliojeruhiwa katika maporomoko hayo ya matope, huku wengine wasipoteza masifa. Hiyo ndio taarifa kuu kule Tanzania. Taarifa nyingine pale juu, mfuko wa mazingira kupunguza athari tofauti za kijinsia. Taarifa nyingine katika upande wa kulia wa Mwananchi, mipango ya utekelezaji mauaji ya bilionea Musia. Taarifa nyingine pale, familia mlinzi aliuawa yatoa maombi. Na mzee Mwinyi, rais aliyetokana na uchaguzi mdogo. Vilevile katika masuala ya siasa, Lissu, jiandaeni huko tuendako ni pagumu. Na hizo ndizo taarifa kuu katika gazeti la Mwananchi.
A similar highlight on the Citizen, that particular story of the landslides. They say death, destruction in Hanang deluge. At least 20 people were confirmed dead yesterday in Hanang district after Katesh town and nearby villages were swamped by floodwaters and mud that came hurtling down a mud mountainside, falling an overnight downpour. More is on page 3. But the big story on the Citizen, roofing sheets where you may have been scammed. The Fair Competition Commission has potentially uncovered an elaborate fraud involving roofing iron sheets mainly used in home construction. And the investigation findings say 14 sheets were procured for either of the two complaints, received and referred to TBS laboratories for testing. In each case, 9 sheets failed to meet standards set for 30 gauge sheets. And the stories on the Citizen. CEOs honor JK with lifetime achievement recognition. I believe JK is Jakaya Kikwete. And Tanzanian green bonds draw global interest support. Tuelekee pale Kampala.
No. We have a look at the Daily Monitor in Uganda. And interesting headline there concerning matters COP28, Uganda sends 600 to climate summit. Well, there's been that whole conversation on how the president slashed the number of people who are traveling for the COP28. I think from somewhere around 700, the number was given to 186 to 144, all the way to 50 essential government officials who are to go. Of course, there are other people traveling from the private sector, but as far as the government is concerned, just 50 people, no joyriders.
That's in Uganda now?
No, that is in
Kenya.
Because I'm looking at the numbers in Uganda and they've sent 600 people for the climate summit, and up to 375 of the delegates are bureaucrats, contrasting with government's commitment to run an austerity budget and cap foreign travel amid revenue constraints, which has forced a funding reduction on removals or programs to benefit the taxpayers. So it looks like on one side we are dealing with our issue of just cutting the cost in terms of travel.
Well, Uganda is going big on...
oh, yes.
And this is not the first time. There was also a whole... a few months ago, there was an event outside, and even on the, Uganda's papers, they were complaining that there was even an inquiry, I think, in the parliament that why is it the fact that, the country sent so many people to that, event.
Yeah. Other stories on the Daily Monitor this morning in Uganda, police army on the hunt for terrorists after twin explosions. And on the top strip, matters healthy living there. Here's why adherence to ARVs is important. And that is a story on page 16 of the Daily Monitor in Kampala this morning. And we are targeted, discriminated against because of dreadlocks. That is the interesting piece there. On the lower strip of the Daily Monitor, farm in Tinda vaccine plant launch speaks out. Elsewhere, scientists start search for post-TB medicine. And other stories there, Mayor backs 48-hour rule for suspects. And that's the Daily Monitor in Uganda this morning.
Right, turejea hapa nchini Kenya as we take a look at masuala ya caricature, the cartoons this morning on page 13. That is where you'll get the cartoon for Daily Nation on page 12 of the Standard, and kama kawaida, page 10 of People Daily. We do start with page 12 of the Standard, And they take you all the way to Dubai, where the COP28 is happening. And someone there says, can you keep it low there? You're trying to save the world. And just outside there, they have a very stark difference of what is actually happening in matters saving the world. And it seems there's actually a building there written Gaza, and it now paints a picture of what is happening, the Israel-Hamas war. Wow.
Interesting cartoon there. And on the Daily Nation, a caricature of there's someone who is drowning, and what's written there is GBV, and the woman or the girl is seemingly crying for help, and this just paints a picture to what has been happening, the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. I do hope it moves from just talks to actually dealing with all that, because there's been an increase in matters GBV, and of course that is a part of the conversation we'll be having at around 8 a.m., focusing on just protecting people living with disability.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And finally on page 10, just outside the parliament, Kenya's parliament, there is a group of common wananchi there, and one of them says the building and the occupants should be sold. Waheshimiwa stopped going to parliament over scrapped 5,000 Kenya shillings allowance.
Yeah, it reminds me on, I think it's Friday or Thursday last week, the speaker was complaining that the parliament building is almost empty. I know after seeing Wamegoma because of
5,000 allowance.
of the allowances by SRC, just speaks to how much what your leaders value. And I'm seeing an interesting one here on the Daily Monitor in Kampala. I think should have a look at it. It's like their cartoon is on the, usually on the
front page.
Yeah, front page.
The lizard.
The lizard, yeah. And today it says they just upgraded from the 70 cent to New York, and this speaks on the 600 who've been sent to Dubai for the COP28. And Uganda sends 600 to climate summit. Interesting one. There seems we share problems across the East African realm. Yeah.
Speaking of problems, viewer, this particular morning, as promised, we'll be talking about the whole floods crisis and take a look at the human toll, and we'll be having some bright minds to discuss this. Oscar Onyango, Managing Disaster Manager, Disaster Management Department at the Kenya Red Cross Society. We'll also be having William Omole, Response Manager at the El Nino Emergency Response, World Vision Kenya, as well as Aaron Green, Sustainable Development Practitioner. You can always chime in on this conversation from wherever you're watching us in any part of the country and tell us, how can we as a country really mitigate this crisis? Has it reached that particular point that you can call it a state of an emergency and actually a crisis? Talk to us on our socials at TV47KE, that is on Facebook, at TV47 News on X, mine at Jeringita _ and Alemoki _F at Fred Indimuli. We're taking a short break. You're watching Morning Cafe. panel ranging from the World Vision as well as the Kenya Met Radiological Department, Sustainable Development Manager, as well as the Kenya Red Cross Society, just to explain to us how far we've really come when it comes to these particular floods. But let's take a look at a bit of explaining, just to understand what this particular how we are so far. And so first, according to the Kenya Meteorological Department forecast, as of yesterday, all the way to the 6th of December, this particular year. So this is their forecast, how it is going to be looking like. So the rainfall is expected to continue over the southern parts of the country. So the dry weather conditions are expected over the northern parts of the country, as well as some strong southeasterly winds of 12.5 meters per second and above expected over parts of Turkana County and other bits of this particular explainer. So taking a look at measures that have been taken by the state so far. So far, the cabinet has enhanced the deployment of the KDF and all public. Let me just have that once more. Right, we'll be getting into that, the whole measures that have been taken by the government. And so the counties that have been affected so far include Garissa, Isiolo, Mandera, Marsabit, Samburu, Tana River, Wajir, Kilifi, and Mombasa. And our panelists this morning will be telling us why is it that these particular counties really have, have been affected as compared to other counties so far. I mean, yesterday, rather last week, the cabinet saying about 36 of the 47 counties affected. So we'll be taking a look at the whole impact of that. Let's cross over to something else here and just have that. So yes, I was taking a look at the whole measures that have been taken. So the deployment of the KDF and all public civilian aircraft to transport medical supplies, among other essentials, as well as the cabinet has also sanctioned the distribution of over 150,000 mosquito nets to the affected counties. Remember last week, the cabinet saying there is a whole some diseases, cholera, malaria, diarrhea, and increased at a spike of some of these diseases. Other measure taken, the cabinet further committed, the coordination of all state efforts to the National Disaster Operation Center. Let's take a look at something else here. And another bit, an ad hoc committee, cabinet committee on disaster response has been set up and will be steered by the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, to coordinate the whole state response on the same. Let's take a look at something else that has, taking a look at that. All right, so trying to get some of this other bits. Yes, so the counties affected by the El Nino, and now taking a look at some of these particular numbers, 95,772. These are the households that have been affected, and 45,083 the displaced households, so of which over 13,108 households, which are now in 96 displacement camps, as it is according to the Red Cross Society. You can take a look at some of these numbers even as we cross over to the panelists this morning. Right, and now after taking a look at these particular numbers, now just to actually understand what these particular numbers and this particular data really means, and let me reintroduce the guest this particular morning. On my immediate right, Oscar Onyango, Manager, Disaster Management Department, the Kenya Red Cross Society. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
William Omole, Response Manager at the El Nino Emergency Response at World Vision Kenya. Really had to come with a reflector. Ungebeba kadhaa even for us.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally, Aaron Green, Sustainable Development Practitioner.
Asante sana.
Good to have you once again. I'll start with you, Onyango, on this. From where you sit, the Kenya Red Cross Society, we had this conversation even before the El Nino began, warning Kenyans that this is what is to come. So far, from what was told, the whole warnings that were given, and so far what we are seeing right now, did you, first of all, as Red Cross, were you expecting that we will be announcing some of this 100+ death tolls?
Thank you. Looking at it, we could be announcing even more than what we are having right now. Mm-hmm. Yes, and of course, immediately the announcements were made, then the interagency teams, including the government and stakeholders around, then tried as much as possible to their best to put preparedness actions into place. Out of which, if those preparedness actions were not really put into place, then trust me, the numbers could be far much higher than they are now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also for you, Mole, from where you come from, you also deal with matters emergency response. Now, I mean, Kenyans were told this is what is going to happen. Both the national government and the county government knew their roles. When you take a look at how it has been, the response has been dealt with, Kenyans feel that there has been somewhat of a poor response to it. At the end of the day, who bears the greatest brand when it comes to how the response has been made?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to start by agreeing with my colleague that, yeah, there were lots of preparation, especially when we had the forecast indications of the possibility of enhanced rainfall, El Nino for that matter. And a number of counties, a number of coordination platforms were activated. The government, both at the national level and also at the county level, the humanitarian workers also being part of this at the national level through the UN OCHA and also at the different hub coordination levels, you realize that response operation, I'll begin by saying it's everybody's responsibility, because out there we have the messaging on what needs to be done as part of preparedness, just to mitigate the possible risks that and the impact that would come should there be an occurrence. So I would say the information that was out there somehow helped. Look at even what has happened in the urbans, for instance, picking Nairobi, a little bit of opening the waterways helped a great deal. Otherwise, we would be talking of bigger numbers. So it has to do with how much are we able to get the information and what do we do with that information. So we'll be able to apportion responsibilities, but at different levels based on who gets the information, how do they put it into practice, and how do we measure the little resources towards that.
Right. And Green, I'll ask you the same. I mean, at the end of the day, who has the greatest responsibility when it comes to how the emergency response is conducted at the end of the country? Because the county government would blame the national government for a delayed disbursement of funds. The national government would say the county government probably did not prepare enough. Kenyans would want anyone responsible to just, be responsible. So at the end of the day, who do you think bears the biggest responsibility in all this?
Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this panel. From my background as somebody who's pushing for sustainable development is something that brings everybody on board. And it's anchored so much on principles of climate justice, societal development. And there's a principle that talks about responsibilities in development are differentiated and with different capacities at different levels. So it means that we are all part of this. It's only that we look at the aspect of response for a long time. We have knee-jerk responses. In the SDG, in its entirety, as a development framework, looks at everything around societies and communities, and a response to disaster and risks is very key. But it envisages this response not only in terms of management, but building resilience. And in this context, resilience is being looked at as the capacity to be able to adjust to adverse effects. And today, the world is experiencing disasters that are extreme, some stemming from environmental or climate change issues like now the floods that we are experiencing in Kenya. This affects communities in different angles, and it affects extremely people in informal settlements, like he said, in cities, like in Nairobi, and also persons with disabilities, in that informal settlements have got, there's lack in terms of planning that would ease challenges that would come in the event of adverse effects of climate change like floods, the clogging of drainage, there's no proper planning. People living with disability, because of the impairments, curtails their responsiveness. So they bear the biggest brunt. From your question, in your context, you asked who should be held responsible. One, in our country, we have two tiers of government, and governments are development agencies. So, first of all, I would say that the government should be held responsible because, one, they haven't put a disaster risk response at the core of their work.
The nation or the county?
National government and the county government. And it is so sad that county governments, and equally even the national government, have got fully fledged departments in disaster risk. But the aspect of early response is always very low. The wait for this to happen is when now they start having those ad hoc meetings and committees running away up and down, trying to allocate resources. Yet there are technical people that already in these job opportunities and budgets allocated. Just like Omole and Oscar have said, that there's a lot of eventualities in terms of deaths that we experience. And there could be even more. Why? Because there hasn't been great understanding and awareness on the bit of the communities, and also lack of more prominence in early response and signals at community levels, at government levels. And this brings a lot of strain in development agencies that would come in terms of humanitarian and ad hoc response. Yeah. Right. So it is basically from who is supposed to be there, the national government, the county government, because even the policy regarding this, it's very silent and I would say naive at certain context, because there's that disconnect with the standards.
So according to it trickles down from the national and county governments down to the people.
Yes.
Okay. Oyango, 142 lives lost as of Saturday, from what I have. And what he's talking about seemingly some knee-jerk reactions, having ad hoc committees and all this. My question would be, now the fact that the government would say, we're going to arrest you if you're going to cross a river or a flooded area, a flooded road, what kind of image does that picture resonate even to people who live around this particular area? They really want to move from point A to point B. I mean, yes, Red Cross would be there, and I've seen Red Cross, in different parts, even on your socials, helping people move from point A to point B. But what kind of message does that resonate with people around this particular areas when you tell them, we will arrest you and even try for prosecute you for all this?
Now, what I would say that message portrays is this, and linking to the question you asked about readiness, and again, who is responsible. Like you hear as mentioned, all of us, the community members, stakeholders, the government are responsible. So the government has an arm that ensures that a given law is sustained or observed, so to say. And by this, then, in the responsibility part, the community members have a responsibility to ensure that they are away from these hazardous areas. Number two, they have the responsibility of ensuring that the information given, as shared by Omole here, is adhered to and observed. Then they also have a responsibility to ensure that they take care of the elderly, the disabled people in those particular areas. Then now here comes the government watching what is happening down there at the ground. Yesterday, a boda guy was crossing some flooded water and was swept away. The other days, you see vehicles, they are seeing that this water, the levels are high, it's moving very fast. We should not get into this. And you see someone courageously trying to pass through. Then I think the government is coming in now to exert that pressure and law. That if you try to cross such, if you are successful, then we will arrest you. So the government is trying to insert or exert pressure on the community members so as to adhere to safety measures that is for the benefit of the community members. And something I wanted to add with regards to responsibility in this particular angle is that the community members, they really need to know, again, the grounds that they should move to. In terms of preparedness, linking to responsibility, the preparedness comes in, we give the information. The KMD gives us information, it comes to the stakeholders, to the government. Responsibility to trickle it down, we do that part very well. But then the community members at some point will always come to ask you, where do you want us to move to? We don't have that land. So at that point, then again, the government comes in, and then looking at what Green was saying, the government should come in with DRR measures, disaster risk reduction measures, of having set up key areas such that this county, location X, is prone to floods. This particular season, we are having floods. In case the flood comes in, then we need to move these people from this point and take them to that safety. So that, again, we avoid a scenario of now threatening the community members with arrest.
And actually on that bit, I'm reminded the CS Interior, CS Kindiki, saying that they'll be having whole movement of people living around particular dams. And the keyword there was non-negotiable. We'll get to that. Let's take a short break so that when you come back, so that you can analyze how, even in some of these particular areas that I was mentioning, why is it that in these particular areas, from your experience, and what the government should have done before. You're watching Morning Cafe. Stick around for all this. Right, welcome back. We're discussing matters the whole floods crisis and taking a look at 142 lives lost so far due to the El Niño rains. As of Saturday, should we have reached this particular point? And Omole, allow me to chime in on this, even as you respond to what the gentleman were talking about earlier. So I was taking a look at the areas that have really been affected: Garissa, Isiolo, Mandera, Marsabit, Samburu, Tana River, Wajir, Kilifi, as well as Mombasa. From your experience, and because from where you sit, really taking a look at the emergency response across the country, why do you think these particular areas have largely been affected?
Okay, thank you. I would talk about a few things that would point into that. One, we must appreciate that we transitioned into flooding after a very, very prolonged drought period, having more than 4 consecutive failed rainfalls, and the areas that you've mentioned sit squarely within the arid and semi-arid land of the country, the asal parts of the country. One of the characteristics, one of the things that happen is in this area, the ground cover in terms of vegetation cover on the ground is usually minimal, actually zero, in, if I would be correct in this. And when we talk of rainfall, the precipitation, when it rains, we have the rains hit the ground. If the ground is bare, then it means the soil is loose. The other thing, the economic activity that's majorly undertaken in these areas, largely these are pastoral counties, so lots of herds of cattle, and they keep grazing, overgrazing issue, so it loosens the soil structure. So when it rains, these are areas that are prone to flash floods and actually excessive flooding because the ground is not intact, I would say. In addition to that, you realize that the rains fell, and some of these areas were being impacted by the river flows. A number of these areas, for instance, we have rivers dry, or seasonal rivers, for instance. And when the rivers dry, majority of the community tend to move closer to the river because they are able to dig a little bit into the sand and get the water. So water scarcity in this area is a pull factor for people to to reside along the rivers. And the structures that they put, because these are people who keep moving from one area to the other in search of pasture, in search of water, they don't put up the permanent structure. So in terms of planning of the settlement is not as adequate to withstand some of these, forces. So when water comes, you realize that massive flow of water, these rivers begin flowing. All of a sudden, majority of people are unaware, because some of this death, you realize that some of the people are found herding the cattle in the field. So all of a sudden water comes. You cannot run to anywhere because it is all over. So they are swept away. Again, the bit of people imagining that the dry rivers are shallow. With water, you cannot underestimate the force. And that's why even the vehicles, we've seen vehicles, heavy ones, being swept off the road because of that mere imagination of, undermining of the forces of water. So I would say it has so many factors that contribute into this: overgrazing, the economic activity in the area, that basically pastoralism in nature, and looking at the infrastructure distribution in this area in terms of the major roads. We've seen actually even some of the major roads being cut off.
And I was coming to that, and I love Green, you chime in on this. Some of these roads, and what he's talking about, the planners knew some of these things years ago. And they knew that this particular area has, maybe the soil doesn't have water retention as it should be. So we should be constructing roads that maybe look like this. So was it not a proper planning on the same? Because I'm taking a look at some of these roads, according to Kenha, that have been affected so far. including Madogo Garissa A3 Road, Garsen Witu Lamu A7 Road, Mtwapa Kilifi A7 Road, Bangali Madogo A3 Road, Ukunda Lungalunga Road, as well as Thika Garissa Road. All really leading to the whole ASILs, as I was mentioning. Should there have been a proper planning, even in how some of this infrastructure is built?
Thank you so much for that. As a sustainable development practitioner, my focus is on what the International Development Framework talks about, the SDG, that brings in or advocates for resilience, the paradigm from just open planning, but bringing resilience as a drawstring or a safeguard to disaster risks and other extreme bits in all development aspects. One thing that needs to have been done as a best practice is that the infrastructural development in its stages needs to have resilience at the core. Anything that is being thought about in development work needs to have resilience. And resilience in this context is the ability to adjust to adverse effects of any nature, and more so that are stemming from climate change issues. So in the development of infrastructure like roads, there need to be that kind of trajectory or that kind of, they need to envisage the kind of effects that the roads will be subjected to in terms of weather patterns. And more so, taking cognizance that those roads are in ASAL areas where the rivers are perennial, the seasonal I mean, and also the soil is very loose. So in the development of this infrastructure, in the quality assurance and quality control, when these infrastructures are being put there, there needs to be those safeguards, meaning that there's certain clauses that needs to be read out prominently to contractors who are doing these roads. And that is a very serious injustice to communities, because why should we put in resources and give us products that are not standard, that does not safeguard the quality of life of the human beings? So I would say that that is serious ignorance in the part of the body that is mandated to be able to supervise in regards to quality control and quality assurance, of which in this context is the government. And as I said before, that development work today through the SDG has the human being, the well-being of the community, the well-being of the person at the core. Meaning that the rights, everything that is happening has a rights angle. Meaning that everything that is being done, the human being has to be looked at. How is this thing, this infrastructure, this resource, this program, this policy? Look at what are the effects of this. And today, in climate change adaptation, circles and even conversations, all development today, because environmental and climate change issues is the new normal. All conversations around that, it's affecting everything. So it talks about, it demands through all the frameworks that it has, that resilience has to be at the core. And resilience in this context looks at how what we are doing affecting the human person, and what are the safeguards that are going to build the capacity of the human being, in this context, the communities, to adjust responsibly in the adaptation, and what are the socioeconomic and environmental safeguards there. So we say that the duty bearers need to have the right policies, and these policies need to be alive to the latest standards and targets that are directed or are guided by international development frameworks, which are now targets
And passengers are traveling on the...
Let me still, you talk about the whole duty bearers.
Yes.
And Onyango, going to chime on this. One duty bearer is, a duty bearer who gives us the forecast, the Kenya Meteorological Department. Yes. And I was taking a look at now, this is yesterday, as I was reading earlier. So we have a forecast of about 5 days since yesterday, all the way to the 6th of December. So they say rainfall is expected to continue over the southern parts of the country. Dry weather conditions expected over the northern parts of the country. Another one there is strong southeasterly winds of 12.5 ms and above expected over parts of Turkana County. When you take a look at how believable some of these duty bearers have become over the years, if you're going to release some of this forecast and even data, we have seen scenarios where some of this forecast that has been provided has been met by, opposing, even by people in the government themselves. So Kenyans would ask, okay, if we're not going to even trust some of this, forecast that is there, why should we even trust the data provided? For example, the death toll that can be provided by the government itself.
Thank you so much, Stanley. Climate change, as Green is mentioning it, is the biggest challenge that the world is facing right now. So why I'm saying this is because when the climate change was getting to crawl in slowly into the scenery of the environment or into the world, then it became so unpredictable to an extent that even these agencies that were in the past giving us very credible forecasts could not be trusted. But for me, I do not want to blame these agencies. Why? Because they were giving whatever the system was showing them. And again, once they gave that system, they had to also try and adapt and see how is this climate change going to affect us. So it became so much unpredictable to an extent that you could link it to spiritual matters, you see? Because sometimes you might say, okay, it's the end times and we cannot predict anything here, you see?
Yes.
But then look at it in the past 1-2 months, in the past 1 month, so to say. I would say that at this moment, in a discussion I've had 2 to 3 weeks ago, the KMD has really tried to give us credible forecasts. And with this credible forecast, then it is advisable that, yes, look at what they give, that El Nino is coming. Guys, prepare.
Yeah.
Those who are keen to prepare, prepared.
Yeah.
And I'd give you a very good example. Look at our traditional flood-prone areas, Kisumu, Busia, and now Homa Bay, Migori. And there's a reason I'm saying, yes, and there's a reason I'm saying, and now Homa Bay, Migori. Traditionally, Kisumu could start because of Nyando, and it's well known for Serikali's idea lady.
Yes.
But have you seen Kisumu somewhere of late?
Not as much.
Not as much. It's when Kisumu is starting to show up slowly, but then Homa Bay is heating up more than Kisumu. Why? Because when the forecast was given, Kisumu through is he called the city manager, Abala?
City manager, Abala, yes.
The guy instructed that the drainages that are leading to these floods be opened.
So that trickles down to the planning of specific counties.
Yes, yes. They were opened thoroughly. And in these forums that we sit in, someone just mentioned that this time round, Kisumu did their best.
Sure.
Because up to now, we are not seeing the diverse effects that we have always seen in the past. And the drainages were unclogged, and we have the dikes that are there somewhere in Nyando Kano area. They were also repaired. And right now, water is flowing and a few people are being affected there. So what I would say is that climate change comes with its challenges. And again, we also need to adapt and be resilient to these challenges. And with this then, we need to have policies in place.
Right.
One, physical infrastructure, and two, non-tangible infrastructure. And in this sense now, the policies, the frameworks, are we even adhering to them? Right now, we are talking about the COP coming up.
Yeah, which is actually ongoing, the COP28.
Yes, it's going on. And then look at what happened in Egypt at the beginning of the year. We had a whole representation of agencies, including the government, being represented there from Kenya, saying that we are hit by drought. Right now, what do you think they're saying in COP28? They're saying now we've been hit by floods. But then the question is, are there frameworks and policies that can guide this particular issue?
And now the whole frameworks, Omole. Some of these dams, I mean, I believe, some of this, even the land that is surrounding it is riparian land. Cabinet Secretary of Interior, Professor Kithure Kindiki, has warned of possible evacuation for people living around this particular, dams, and he says that it is non-negotiable. So some of these areas that are set to affect over 50,000 people include Embu, Tharaka-Nithi, Kitui, Machakos, and Garissa. My question would be, why? we're talking about, frameworks and all this. So why because this is not the first time. Back in, I think even 2018, you had the same of evacuation of people living around there. Is it lack of, some of this framework that having people living even around some of this, riparian land?
Okay, thank you. We need also to appreciate that when a disaster strikes, I think we need to consider prioritizing some of these issues. And I want to believe that the government is coming from the point of saving lives and alleviating the impact of flooding. And that would be like a stopgap measure to ensure that no more lives are lost. Because you see, when you talk about 142 lives, these are people, human beings with future. I mean, some of them are children who would be actually, who have a future for this country, for instance. So the decision and the directive by the government ensuring that, excuse me, that it is a non-negotiable, it gets back to the responsibility of the government to protect lives, to protect even the property and such like stuff. Back to the framework question that you're talking about, we need to really be futuristic as a country, looking into the future. At times, we tend to be limiting ourselves to solving the situation or the problem on the table, not asking ourselves like what happens afterwards. Because even right now, we are talking about flooding. But the truth is, Stanley, we will still need continue talking about this business after even the rain subsides, because you see it's kind of a transition from prolonged drought. We are now talking about flooding. Then we have the other aspect of recovery and resilience, moving towards the next, the other cycle of life. So what I would want to say is, can we have a more futuristic lens as we design, as we have these conversations, so that we look at, based on the patterns that we are seeing, based on the repeat of some of these events that we are seeing. Lots of scientific kind of projection may need to be put into this, because you see, information, data based on the patterns can inform the decisions into the future. So resilience lens that Green was talking about, having that resilience lens to ensure that some of the things and the steps, tangible steps that we've made, we should not be coming back to them. In future, should we have a repeat of the same, then we could be talking of other emerging issues. Because again, it's important to appreciate that it's very difficult to predict the magnitude of some of, however much we would prepare, but we are not so sure of the magnitude. So, but preparation is very key. Having a futuristic lens, being intentional in enhancing resilience aspect into this is very, very critical. And that should be the direction that we should be working towards.
Right. Green, let's take a look at other El Nino, the previous ones, comparing to this one. So even as, authorities were warning people, I remember them saying that we expect for this one to actually be better even than the rest. So why is it that, despite the fact that them saying that we do expect to see better fruits and all that, why are we seeing 142 lives lost and the kind of damage that we've had so far?
One, you've talked about the government having statements, which are enforcement statements. And one thing that we need to appreciate and take cognizance of, that we are in a very delicate world today because of the climate change phenomena. It's very erratic. There's no sure predictability of what is going to happen. In the responsibility of the duty bearers is to be able to inform and safeguard communities. How does this happen? Through policies. So it means that policies need to be brought to the understanding of the local person. Mm-hmm. The understanding has to be there, the awareness. So how can this happen? It has to be ongoing. How can this be done? Through well-informed, contextualized programs with the local knowledge systems and understandings packaged into this. Seth and Omole come from the background of response, mm-hmm. meaning that you'll only see them on the stage in the event. That is now the position. For me, as a practitioner in sustainable development, we're talking about working with the communities.
From scratch all the way to...
All through. It is an ongoing process because we are within that ecosystem. So what happens? We need to have proper policy delivery, understanding, more awareness. Then there needs to be the aspect of building capacities of communities in the angle of resilience and adaptation. What this means is that the government from the previous, because this is not the second time, we need to embark on what is called resilience building of these communities and support them or empower them to be in positions to adapt appropriately. And how can this be done? Omole has talked about data. Data can be used for early warning signals. Mm-hmm. And these communities where these floods are being experienced have the knowledge. Mm. They know when these things do happen. And sustainable development is pushing for integration of indigenous knowledge mm-hmm. in designing programs mm-hmm. and informing policy. So these people know that in the event, because they've been living in these communities for all this time, mm-hmm. this year, this era, this airport, they had some floods, and this happened. It swept so and so and so. Just like Oscar talked about, Nyando today is not there on Sirikali's idea. And even in some circles on social media, there have been memes talking about women being cheap from those perennial flooded areas. But this time around, it is something different. Reason is specific duty bearers in those regions have taken it upon themselves to inform the communities early enough and bring in best practice in their knowledge, their indigenous knowledge systems, and put into place activities. And that is what sustainable development is envisaging. So we say that through Goal 11 that talks about safe cities, inclusive communities, and resilient. The word here is resilience. Yes. How are we going to do our work hinged on resilience of communities? Mm-hmm. Then we're going to reduce this. We're not going to find ourselves in knee-jerk activities. And also, I would say it is wrong for us to have those enforcement statements We envisage no harm. These are realities, these are phenomena that have got eventualities, but what happens, like Oscar and Omole, in what they do is they're reducing the risk. That's why he has said that DRR, disaster risk reduction. What are the programs? What are our activities? What are our policies? Because we cannot control the eventualities in terms of deaths. We say that we will stop, but we will put in measures that will reduce these numbers, because that is nature. Yes.
Omole, I'd like you to pick your mind on this. Coming from the El Nino emergency response from World Vision Kenya, you've definitely experienced even other El Ninos and, being on ground when it comes to the whole response of the same. Compare for us how the response for this particular El Nino 2023 has been compared to other years.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry. What I would say is, I would say, since we don't have equal parameters, we may need to look at them uniquely because they happened during different times. The current El Nino is happening when we have, I would say, more or less enhanced systems in place and structures. The previous El Nino happened before we had the devolution. So we had one government coordinating operations across, but right now we have devolved government functions. And disaster risk reduction, we have the structures at the national level. We have the Ministry of Interior coordination through the National Disaster Operation Command Center, the NDOC. And we also have at the county level different mechanisms and structures. I would say right now, Oscar talked about the prediction of the weather and the characteristics that are displayed there, the forecast, I would say. The systems within the Met, I would not speak authoritatively for them, but based on what we see and trying to align the outcome and the results from their prediction, it's more or less seamless, I would say. And this speaks into the improvement in the technology, improvement in the systems and structures in place. Looking at the coordination aspect, from where I sit, I would say there's a remarkable improvement. We are yet to get there, because you see, it's about continuous business improvement. But coordination mechanisms, I would say, they are working. Even what the government is doing. Right now, we see the Office of the Deputy President already has now been pronounced to help with the coordination of the county engagements and even the ongoing response operation. So even on the humanitarian side, realize that the coordination and participation of the different humanitarian agencies within the national level platforms, within the hub platforms, my friend here and also Green will agree with me that lots of improvement is witnessed, especially in the current one. We would say that one of the things we need to be very deliberate about is to pick up some of the lessons that come from this and document them and begin looking at what areas did we not do well, so that should it happen in future, we should be able to improve on such. So that bit of documentation at different levels, at the agency level, at the government level, and be deliberate. We don't just document and put it somewhere as a report, but document, bring all this information together and see how best do we improve in terms of early warning systems in future, how best do we improve in terms of community and stakeholders embracing and appreciating that this information, in planning, in a humanitarian setup, we normally plan with the worst case scenario. So if somebody shouts that there's danger, you don't go out and look and just ascertain what is it. I mean, first of all, take necessary precautions so that should it happen, you'd rather err on the right side rather than being found there and say, I wish I knew. So these are some of the things that I'm saying, that can we pick these lessons? Can we document them and ask ourselves, what exactly do we need to improve on? Right. Because looking at the nature of our country, like even the other countries, we keep oscillating around and across disasters. After El Nino, we'll be moving into another thing. I don't want to be a prophet of doom for this, but you see, looking at the previous pattern, from prolonged drought, here we are talking about El Nino. Next time it will be hunger, because the gains that were made in terms of even working on agriculture, planting to improve on our food security, that has been submerged or swept away. The cropland, and you see such kind of things. So we need to be very deliberate moving forward. Thank you.
And you mentioned, how even from different countries keep on oscillating, and even over the weekend, Tanzania was, dealt a huge blow, the whole landslides. And I'm curious, Onyango, from where you sit, because I'd assume, even as Kenya Red Cross, you also, link with even other countries. Tanzania, for example, when you were reporting on the whole floods, they were also reporting on floods, from that particular country. How do you think, what kind of lessons can we pick from even some of these countries on how, they're mitigating some of these risks that you can also use in this country?
Yes, looking at what Omole is saying around cross-learning, lessons learned, we have the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement that then joins all the Red Cross national societies. And this I would love to link with what Green said about, actually there is a notion about the Red Cross that they are response agencies.
That's what the community knows.
That is the notion about the community, and you can hear Green also mentioning that Red Cross and World Vision here are basically
they come when danger appears.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then, right now I would tell you, because of the climate change issue that we are having, and already from the lessons we have learned in the past, I can tell you that Kenya Red Cross is having a strategic plan that runs up to 2025 that is community-centered. And it is a resilience, almost a resilient framework that has goals that specifically checks on how then do we ensure that our community members are resilient in terms of mitigating this particular action. So the lessons we are learning from our sister country, Tanzania, basically is in terms of what we have discussed about infrastructure. And one thing I've learned with them, even in a programming that we have done with them this year, is that the people there, all the way from the government to the communities, those people are disciplined, in quotes. And when I say disciplined, I mean that when the government speaks, or not even speaks, just coughs, then everybody is alert. What is the government saying? That is the biggest lesson we can learn. Because the government ensures that its people are well taken care of.
Right.
So now, these people, they need to listen to the government, because in the government, we already are having some existing structures and frameworks, even if not fully complete. And these structures and frameworks involve early action protocols, early warning, early action activities that can be done to ensure that we are safe.
Right.
But these other countries, when the government just coughs, then all the structures of the government moves into action, and all the community members are there to that action. So it...
And, sorry to cut short, and now follow up on that. I see Kenya Red Cross plans to reach about 250,000 people. So that's about 50,000 households across the 36 counties.
Yes.
From where you sit, I believe you might be really in the right place to tell us. So far, in the 50,000 households that you're planning to reach, how many have you reached so far, and what kind of challenges are you really experiencing in the midst of really trying to reach some of these households? It matters even evacuation, matters giving them relief food and all that.
Yes, Stanley, in the early stages, actually Kenya Red Cross was looking at reaching approximately 30,000 households, which is approximately 150,000 people. And with the unfolding situation and linking to the forecasts that are being given, then the number has changed. Now into 250,000 people approximately. That is 50,000 households being looked at. Up to this point, as we are speaking, Kenya Red Cross has already reached up to 30,000 households.
So you met your earlier target?
earlier target is already being met. And of course, it's with a range of activities. And I can tell you that we have issues around non-food items being distributed in most affected counties and into the people who are displaced in the camps. Then we have food items being distributed. We have wash NFIs, we call them NFIs. In the humanitarian world, you'll hear a lot of abbreviations. But then NFIs just to mean non-food items. And then we have SETA pumps, they are called SETA EUR pumps, that are stationed in places that have this water that is dirty and now being cleaned and purified to ensure that the community members can utilize. And I can freely tell you that so far, Kenya Red Cross, using just one of its SETA machine, is able to produce 20,000 liters of clean water in a particular day. So that tells you that the number being reached in terms of these services is very high. So some of the challenges we are experiencing, of course, the major one is access. And you saw how the infrastructure looks like. The roads are being cut off. Lorries with NFIs and relief items are stuck on the road and they cannot reach to these people that we are going to support. Secondly, and it's something we are working on, is funding. And funding, of course, the last time I was here, I remember we were discussing with the MP whom we were with here, and the discussion was around how then can the government ensure that there is sustainable funding to Kenya Red Cross.
Okay, and I love the fact that you went there, because I was now coming into that for Green, because I'm curious his thoughts, because last week the cabinet approved and directed the National Treasury to release an additional 10 billion shillings to county governments. So that was last week.
Yes.
I was taking a look at also the government spokesperson, that is Isaac Mora, saying the government will disperse 625.8 million to help 500,000 people in those areas that I was mentioning earlier. I mean, fine, these funds will actually be dispersed, but do you feel like the impact of this money will be felt deep into these villages here?
I said here previously that sustainable development is about data, and data is information. And information that gets into the community, if previously is not credible, and in this context, I'm talking about credibility in terms of consistency in the information from those who are talking about the release. In our country, before this happened, there's an arm that was talking about we have released this amount of money to counties. At the same time, after some short time, the counties say we have not got any money. After some time, the data in terms of information sharing is more distorted when it is being said that use the monies, that the resources that you have, because the one that we have is not yet there. The inconsistency in this kind of information from where this money is being disbursed would always create that notion that even what is being talked about having been disbursed, if even in those host institutions that are supposed to be receiving the disbursed money themselves are not consistent. So how would we be sure that this would get there? I don't want to talk about it, but the thing is, I would say that communities need to be empowered. In this context, let us localize the conversations. Let us build the capacities of communities through grassroots organizations that would be able to follow up on this. The governance around disaster risk would also be very key. I think Oscar and Omole would allude to this in their work at the ground, how this happens. And what you've brought in is an aspect of governance. Yes. Accountability of the resources that are being talked about, right from the statements that are being made that we have been released. How is it time bound? How can we be able to trail this money from the point of statement that we have released? So, released to who? That is the question. Released to who? And what are the frameworks through which they're going to account for this money? And this money, what is it going to do Oscar has brought out the jargons in this, non-food items and all those things. But here we are talking about a blanket release. That is not best practice in development, because we want to know that we have released 5 billion to revamp infrastructure regarding access that is talked about. In the 10 billion that we've released, 3 billion will go into supporting this specific item. That money has to be brought down in a budget form, where communities know that this amount of money was released for this and this, so they can hold people accountable.
Okay.
Otherwise, serious pilferage, and that makes even the communities where the communities that need to benefit from this have a lot of jitters in terms of listening to such kind of information. It's very important. What we say in sustainable development is that data needs to be consistent. And governance has to be very, very key when we talk about release of resources, and particularly in resources in the lens of funding, that is money. Otherwise, it is going to be very difficult for us to convince communities that this is going to happen. If I may add on that, Oscar has brought a very good scenario in our neighbors, how there's serious seamless flow of information and responsiveness. That is a serious indicator of integrity and connect between the government and the community. But when it comes to where we sit, where you and me and Omole and Seth, no, because what they're doing, they're supplementing government work. And with their ears on the ground, I'm sure that if given a chance to mention what they hear from the ground, it is pathetic. What we say is that for us to be able to have good impact envisaged in the frameworks, like the Sendai framework in disaster risk, the UN Convention on the Rights of People Living with Disability, and also the SDG, the International Development Framework, they have targets. And I said that sustainable development is envisages or uses the rights model. So when you talk about money being released, the person that is in this kind of crisis needs to know. And how does he need to know? Which structures are there to be able to help him to oversee or interrogate where this money is going. For example, today they say money has been released. To who? And this person that money has been released to, what are they doing? What are the parameters? Yes.
And Omole, even as World Vision, also close the government really some of this money being released. Do you agree that matters accountability really play key? I mean, we're talking matters the whole 10 billion, about 625.8 million. Matters accountability. Do you agree with him?
Okay, I would say accountability should be, for lack of a better term, considered a non-negotiable, because you see the role of accountability not just on matters money, but even in terms of having responsibility bestowed upon somebody. We need to be accountable in all spheres of what we do, and this should actually be not only maybe from the government side, but even as an individual. Green has talked about a number of issues that are very, very critical that need to be, we may need to continue having conversation about. When we talk about even development and we look at it from the wealth distribution or distribution of resources, that would be very, very critical, because you see, the element of skewness that come as a result of the other factors probably come as a result of not having adequate information across and such like stuff is something that needs to be looked into. But accountability, not just from the community point of view. also the systems, the mechanisms and the structures that we have in place, right from the government, even for us as the humanitarian agencies. Accountability is something we should really not run away from, because it is what defines what we do. Look at the different pillars or the framework, accountability framework. You know, we talk about it when we have community participation, consultation and participation. So the consultation and participation means inclusivity. Consultation and participation means information sharing, so that people are aware. These people live in these areas that we are talking about. Mm-hmm. They've lived there for long. They'll tell you that when it rains, the river or the water will flow in this direction. Yeah. So even as we get there, designing even probably a water pan or a water storage infrastructure, we have to listen to that information. In as much as I have the technical background from the training, I have to listen to that local knowledge. We enhance accountability by ensuring that whatever they say feeds into the designing and the modeling of the programs that we do. Other than that, also the different community structures. At the moment, we have a response that's going on across. Red Cross, our colleague, talked about the non-food items, the jargons and such like stuff. You know, it has to be appropriate to the context, whatever the interventions. So how do we ensure?
And even as you continue, now one of the interventions that has been raised, and even in Nairobi, even before when the Kenya Met Department was, announcing this particular forecast, authorities even in Nairobi said we're going to buy boats for this. Kenyans laughed it off, but then now in different parts of the country, in some counties, yep, it has been an idea that has been fronted. From where you sit as El Niño emergency response, do you think this is a viable option?
Okay, I would say response intervention has to be informed by assessment. Mm-hmm. So before any roll-up or intervention is rolled out in a given area, there has to be a rapid assessment or an assessment that informs the interventions. So in some context, I would give an example of Tana River. Mm-hmm. For instance, the other day we had the river, the bridge being swept off, so people could not access Hola from Garissa. Mm-hmm. People could not access these other areas. So in such a case, and the human needs are there, how do we ensure that people are reached with the intervention? We have to enhance, to devise a way of crossing over to reach to them. So the boat in that context is a viable option. Within Nairobi, it's a very interesting conversation because now, looking at even the way the city, Nairobi, is planned, mm-hmm, I'm just imagining the boats moving from where to where, in which areas. However, the context, should it be that now the place is submerged totally and people have to move and the boat happens to be the option, mm-hmm, why not? Based on the assessment. Response, you don't just pick things and push them down.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm saying we're really out of time, and there's one important factor that we really have to discuss, matters education, before I get your final thoughts. Mm-hmm. And learning resumes this coming January. This coming January also, the Kenya Met Department says rainfall will peak again the same year. Oscar, from now, Red Cross, what do you foresee, even when you talk about risk reduction and all that, when it comes to now education? Do we foresee a situation where come January, learning in some parts of the country will not take place because of these floods?
Of course, Stanley, very true. We might have disruptions in some parts of the country, but then what is happening right now is that in these committees that the humanitarian workers sit in the disaster management committees within the county level and at national level, we have made sure that there is an education sector representative. Mm-hmm. And these people then are here to advise us, number one, because some of the schools are being utilized as camps. Number two, some of the schools are inaccessible at the moment. Mm-hmm. So then these people in these particular committees are there then to see how is the situation unfolding, all the way from the meteorological department forecasts, the responses being done, and then now into the future, the recovery actions. So with that, then we go back to preparedness. And this is now preparedness within a response. How are you prepared for this particular sector once we have done with this response? So then these particular people in the education sectors are now sitting and see what then can we do. Should we have infrastructure built up? Is it going to be viable? And should we have, people being moved to different schools, or maybe combining schools together? So like Omole has said, those are now the assessments that the education sector is doing in terms of already looking at recovery. Because there are some sectors that you can't say that are looking at response right now. Education is basically looking at, once we recover from this, how are we going to pick up so that learning continues for our students? Yes.
Allow me to get your final thoughts as we wrap it up.
Yes. Thank you so much. My final thoughts would basically be with regards to what are the needs right now for the community members, and of course to our stakeholders outside there. We are seeing the situation unfolding, and of course there is increase of people being displaced. So meaning shelter and settlement is coming in as number one. And of course, when I say shelter and settlements, we are talking about people displaced. And the question here is, are we talking of people only displaced in the camps? Because we have others displaced and integrated into the community. And I can tell you, it's over 50% of those who are displaced that are integrated into the community. So meaning we are having a big variance somewhere that we need to check. How then do we ensure that these people have shelters restored in the future? Then food assistance, of course, has been going on so much. And I would talk about water, hygiene and sanitation also. There is a lot of dirty water running now. You can see the cases in Lamu now. We are already focusing there because of 1 or 2, 3 cholera cases being reported. So then the Ministry of Health already is gearing towards that, but then the stakeholders and the communities need to come in, and as a resilient way, the communities need to adhere to the information they are being given in terms of getting clean water and avoiding that here and there, but the stakeholders need to come in support. Again, I would like to talk about one issue, 2 issues that are really being missed on. Issues around protection. There are a lot of SGBV cases on the rise, and the sphere that we are talking in, people are not really looking at this. And of course, when SGBV cases comes in, then of course we have mental cases. Mental health and psychosocial cases that are also coming in. One, because of loss of infrastructure. 2, the effects that have hit these particular people. And again, looking at those factors such as SGBV, then also leaves one affected mentally. How are we looking at these people? And finally, then looking at just the operational leads. How is the government going then to support these agencies that are here? Because government is our main machinery. How then is it going to support World Vision? How is it going to support Kenya Red Cross to ensure we reach to these people? Thank you.
Final thoughts in a sentence or so, both of you, because of time.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, just to agree with Mr. Nyango here, it's important also to work towards having a coordinated, enhancing the coordination mechanisms to ensure, because as I had said, and it's clear that response is not a one-man show, and even just DRR in general is not a one-man show. So we need to see more of coordination, more of collaboration, more of working together, pulling resources together. Resources will never be enough, so that whatever little we have, we are able to deepen the impact and alleviate more suffering. It would be sad to see more people dying.
Okay. Green, in a sentence, kindly, your last thoughts.
Resilience building and adaptation should be the reference point and inform policy formulation, policy delivery, and also inform social design and programming to give us the best outcomes in regards to this. And also, all these activities need to align to the International Development Framework, the SDGs, specific